They're here.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender.
Hulk, smash.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
Here's Johnny.
What do you want?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
You never go ass to mouth.
Now what is so damn funny?
And here we go.
We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight.
The Force will be with you. Always.
But the truth! You can't handle the truth! Showtime, everybody! Showtime!
What is up, fanboys and fangirls? I'm Chris the Dace Man Dace, bringing you our third edition of the For Real Movie Club, where today we will talk about summer movies, Jaws, One Crazy Summer, Stand By Me, and Weekend at Bernie's. Joining me this evening, first, Mr. Mike Paden.
What's shaking, y'all? Welcome to Mega Powers Radio's For Real Movie Club. Woo!
Woo! And joining us also tonight, Tony Mango.
What's up, everybody? Everything that Mike Paden said. Woo!
Woo!
It's summer. Woo!
Summertime, guys, and that's right. That's why we've chosen you a lineup. Yesterday was the first official day of summer. Today is the first official For Real Movie Club of the summer. So, we're going to go over movies such as Jaws, One Crazy Summer, Stand By Me, and Weekend at Bernie's. All things that end up on the beach at one point or another, or near some kind of body of water, or a body. So, we'll kick things off with the 1975 classic, Jaws. The American thriller film, directed by Steven Spielberg, was based on a novel of the same name. The prototypical summer blockbuster. Its release is regarded as a watershed moment in motion picture history. In the story, a giant man-eating great white shark attacks beachgoers on Amity Island, a fictional summer resort town, prompting the local police chief to hunt it with the help of a marine biologist and a crazy professional shark hunter. The film stars Roy Schneider as police chief Martin Brody, Richard Dreyfuss as the oceanographer Matt Hooper, and Robert Shaw as that crazy shark hunter Quint. First off, we're going to go around the panel, and we're going to get your initial reactions to Jaws if you can remember the first time you saw it. So for me, at least with these movies, I've seen them multiple times. So when you first saw Jaws, we'll start with you, Tony. What was your initial reaction for the movie?
I saw Jaws when I was a kid, and I remember at the time thinking that the shark was amazing, and the whole rest of the movie just did not matter. It was just kind of like, what is this movie? This is, wait, there's the shark. Okay, now we're watching Jaws. Like, the whole build-up to it, none of that was actually a movie. It was just, let's look at a cool shark. And now that I watched it for a second time, I kind of thought the same thing a little bit. But I have a much better appreciation for the setup of the movie as well.
Paden, what was your initial reactions to Jaws?
Well, crap. The first time I saw Jaws actually wasn't the movie. It was the ride at Universal Studios. And I was a little kid of maybe 6 years old, and it scared the living shit out of me. So I didn't bother seeing the movie until I was way older, probably like 16 or 17. And then after I saw it, I was not as scared. It was not scary at all. Of course, I guess by that age it shouldn't be. I had a tough time watching it just because it's old. But I don't know if I want to get into this now, but I have a theory about movie making. And it's that there's a distinct period in movies where they got better and where they were really stupid, and that's at the point where Jaws was made. I think any movie before Jaws is that old version of storytelling where you're going things really slow and all the shots are really wide and there's not all this excitement going on, all the stuff that hold over from the 30s. Jaws changed it up and made it to the style that is pretty much stuck around all the way until today. Maybe it got shifted around the 2000s a little bit, but they cemented that. And I'll always say when someone's telling me about an old movie, like, did it happen before or after Jaws? And that's all I need to know if I'm probably going to like it or not. And Jaws is just right in the middle. It's got that slow time in it, but then it's also got a lot of this excitement as well. So it's a tough movie to judge in that regard.
For sure. I remember the first time that I saw the movie Jaws. Like you said, I was younger, and it was terrifying. But to go back and watch it now, I don't know if I would be so much as terrified as if I was just, kind of surprised that the shark didn't show up till the end. One of the interesting things about the Jaws filming is that they had several robotic sharks, of which they lost at sea, and the others kept breaking down, and actors were having problems cooperating with the machine. So therefore, they decided to start shooting at the perspective of the shark itself. That's why we don't really see the shark till the end. And during the first initial scenes with all these actors that are killed off, that's why we just see it from the shark's perspective. On that note, and we'll continue with you, Mr. Paden. What did you think of the camera, the choice of shooting the camera angle from the shark's perspective for at least, I would say, the good first half of the movie?
You mean for the fact that we only saw the fin?
The fin, and at most times you would see the camera coming up to the victim rather than seeing...
Oh, like a POV?
Yeah.
This was something that was really big, once again, in the older horror movies where you would not see the monster till the very end. And we don't get very often today. I think the closest thing we got today was the newest Godzilla movie, where people hated it for that fact that you didn't see the monster until the end. Mm-hmm. People can't take suspense anymore, and for me, I liked it, but I think for the general movie-going public, this is one of those signs of the older times that people are not going to like too much.
For sure. Tony, what was your thoughts on the camera angles that were used within the movie Jaws?
I think it kind of makes the movie. You start off in the first scene, and it's a real playful scene. You know, the hippie chicks taking her top off, and they're having fun. They're drunk. They're stumbling around and all that. And it's kind of, even though this is a morbid thing to say, it's kind of fun to be the shark in that moment because you're like, yeah, fuck you, I ate you, with like that kind of thing. But then throughout the movie, you start seeing, he kills the kid, and you're really like seeing a lot of other vicious things happen. And then it gets disturbing that you're in the shark's perspective because you know what's going to happen next is you're going to see, a limb torn off or something. And we were talking about the idea of modern movies doing this. I kind of agree with the people that said that the Godzilla movie could have used more Godzilla. I don't think that this tactic worked with that movie because that was sort of building itself on being a Godzilla movie instead of being a movie about a monster. But one movie that is pretty recent that really pulled this off well, I think, was Cloverfield. We talked about it before on 4-Year-Old Movie Club, but the idea that you don't see the monster for too much of the movie, that helps build that suspense. So the same thing with Jaws. If Jaws would have just been a normal shark like the Anaconda movies or something like that, I don't know if I would have been as freaked out about it.
Another interesting note about this movie is it was more or less Steven Spielberg's first break into the movie field, so he was also handed a lot of challenges. The film had trouble production going over budget and past schedule as which was originally planned. Like we said, there was multiple malfunctions with the shark itself. He had to deal with two actors who didn't like each other off screen, who was Richard Dreyfuss and Roy Schneider. They didn't really get along from stories that have been told about the production itself. With all that in mind, and Tony, I'm going to ask you first, how did you feel Steven Spielberg did for his debut, more or less the film that got him on the map?
Exceptionally. There's a reason why Jaws is always brought up as a classic movie. I think a lot of classic movies are kind of overhyped and people just buy into them because they're referred to as classic movies. But there's a select few that it seems like anybody who watches it, they will agree that it justifies itself being on that list. And this is one of those movies. If you look at the career of Spielberg and you start listing off, the quote-unquote greatest Spielberg movies, everybody mentions Jaws eventually. And I think it's justified.
Paden, same question.
Steven Spielberg is my favorite director of all time. And if you ask me what my top 5 favorite movies from him, Jaws actually would not be in there. But it being so vital, not just to launching his career, but as I was talking about before, changing the movie industry in itself is huge. And watching this movie in itself, you may not appreciate everything that you're watching, but its significance for the history of filmmaking is so important. And I assume, I'm not 100% sure on this, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I would have to imagine this is one of those movies that's been preserved in the Library of Congress.
Yep, in 2001. Some other interesting facts about the movie. The most infamous line that came from it, "You're going to need a bigger boat," was in fact improvised by Scheider as he was chumming, and to me it resonates so much. That line right there, where he backs up, slowly goes into the cabin where Quint's sitting, and says, "You're going to need a bigger boat." This is a wrestling term, but I marked out for that moment. Crazy. What we're going to do right now is, and we'll ask you, Paden, what was the high point of the movie for you when it came to Jaws?
The high point of the movie, and I hate to say this, is actually at the end when the shark dies. I think just the heroics of that guy. He's falling down the boat towards the shark's mouth and able to pull himself out of that situation and get the kill. I think after seeing the destruction that the shark has done the whole movie, it was a great story. This was actually a book originally, and I think one of the complaints that we have about this is that it's really slow in the beginning. And I never read the book, but from what I read about the book is that it's even slower. Like, you don't see the shark until the last 100 pages of what's a pretty sizey book.
Mm-hmm.
So when they wrote the screenplay for it, they basically went up to the writer and was like, "Hey, we just kind of like this part, so we're just going to use this, and we're going to write everything else on our own."
Tony, what was your high point of the movie Jaws?
I actually kind of have to disagree about the ending a little bit, because what bothers me about it is when you get that satisfaction, and this is something that bothers me about any movie that does this, the shark is killed and maybe a minute and a half goes by and the movie's over. It's like, the shark's killed, Dreyfus goes up and he's just kind of like, "Hey, cool." And then it's just like, "So, I want to go back to the beach?" "Yeah, sure." Credits. Like, that takes it away from me. I think actually the best part of the movie is the build up to that. Just the idea that every once in a while you're getting nervous that another person is going to die and the shark's going to come back, and every little nuance throughout the movie where somebody, I don't want to say disagrees with the idea that the shark's killing people because they know it, but like they kind of ignore the issue. And that one guy, I can't remember the character's name, but the one who's overseeing the whole town and he's really concerned with the 4th of July festivities, when you can get annoyed with him that it's just he's ignoring it, and eventually it's going to come bite him in the ass metaphorically. But I think that's actually the highlight of it. It's just sitting through the whole thing and wondering what's going to happen next.
Awesome. When it comes to casting in Jaws, some other actors were actually up for the role originally of Hooper. Some names that were thrown out there were John Voight, Joel Grey, and Jeff Bridges, but for whatever reason they turned down the role, which ultimately was landed with Richard Dreyfuss, who will actually be in another movie that we will talk about this evening. And the other role of Brody, or the detective Brody, they considered using Charlton Heston for the role of Officer Brody. Spielberg decided to go with another actor. Heston was reportedly so furious that he refused to ever work with the director again. When it comes to casting, and we'll start with you, Tony, how do you feel? Do you feel the roles were? Do you feel the actors were perfect? Would you have changed anything? Anyone else you might have put in there?
You know what? I think that they pretty much hit the nail on the head. If Heston would have been in the Brody role, I don't know if I would have bought it as much. Because part of the reason that ending has a little bit of satisfaction behind it is because Brody's kind of a wimp throughout the movie. He doesn't really seem to do much. He doesn't stand up for himself as much as he should. He doesn't assert his authority over the people that he should. And it takes until that very last push for him to kill the shark, and then it's just like, I did it. They even built in a thing that he's afraid to be on the water. So if Heston would have done that, man, I don't know, I would have believed that. I would have thought that he would have gone out with a knife and just killed the shark or something. Just swim and just be like, "Here, fucking, I'll use a stick and kill you." Heston would have been better in the part that Shaw was, if anybody. But Shaw did it perfectly well too, because he's a despicable person in the movie, and when he dies, I mean, yeah, obviously you're rooting for him not to die, but when he does, it's just like, it's okay. It would have been different if Dreyfus would have died.
Mm-hmm.
But let alone Dreyfus in the movie, he's an ass. He's a little pipsqueak.
Yeah.
And he pulled that off really well too, because I would be angry as all hell if I was dealing with him, just like everybody else is throughout the movie.
An interesting note about the Dreyfus character Hooper. Originally in the script, he was intended to die, but the shark footage that they used with the cage, apparently Spielberg liked how well it meshed, that the shark got in the cage and banged it up, and the footage was awesome to the point where the scuba diver escaped. They just stuck with that, and that's why Hooper ended up living in the film. Paden, what were your feelings on the casting?
Casting was fine. I when you bring up a name like Charlton Heston, I completely agree with Tony. Heston was way too much of a badass, especially at this point of his career. If you had him out there, he would have just had a picture, just as Tony said, having a knife in his throat. You damn dirty sharks! Going out stabbing to death.
Get your jaws off me, you damn dirty shark.
I think all the casting was fine. I think it's great that at the time these are all relative unknowns, which is the smartest thing you could have done in film at the time, especially with an unknown director like Steven Spielberg. And this was a movie that made a lot of careers for people. Who knows? Maybe that Mechanical Shark went on to have a career. I did not care for the sequels, by the way. I don't know if we're going to be talking about those, but I guess we'll get more into that later. The hardest thing for the actors, I think, was the fact that the script was really weak, and the fact that this movie made it to be so well on such a weak script, because throughout this whole movie, all the dialogue sucks. All of it. And that's actually one of the things that was another big problem with this movie. You're talking about there being tensions between actors and going over budget. One of the problems is that they just cannot find a decent goddamn writer to make the script sound good. The whole idea of going after the shark was fine, but the conversations between people was so wooden, so unrepresentative of what you would want these people to be talking like. Everyone was way too old for the part that they were in. I just was not that part. That part did not get me immersed into it. So I don't know if it's necessarily the actor's fault. I think that's more on script writing. But acting is not the top-notch thing you're going to see this movie for.
For sure. I mean, it's funny, too, because the most infamous line was improv. So it's further proving that the script itself was kind of rough. Another interesting fact before we leave the cast part of this conversation, Robert Shaw, who plays Quint, was not the original choice for Quint. In an ironic note, the original actor got into trouble with the IRS and had to flee the country. Later, after Jaws had debuted in the cinematic theater, Shaw himself had IRS troubles and had to flee the country. So it's interesting to note that happened with him, and he also apparently had a drinking problem during the filming production. So that's another reason why there was delay and there was problems. And most of the time, I would imagine he was improvising because he was batshit crazy in most of the film. Paden, you touched a little bit on it a few minutes ago when we were talking about casting sequels. Jaws did go on to have several sequels. And as all horror movies that have sequels, they kind of get bad as they go along.
And they also get 3D.
Yeah. As long as, I mean, they didn't go the route of Jason. He didn't end up in space for whatever reason.
I would love Jaws in space.
Swimming in space with a big that astronaut helmet on. Somehow still eating people.
I like to think, just for my own personal happiness, he made a cameo appearance in Sharknado. So that's one thing I hope for. He didn't get credited for it, of course, because they don't want to spoil it for the fans on IMDb, but I'd like to think Jaws made an appearance in Sharknado. When it comes to sequels, Mr. Paden, what were your thoughts? Obviously, sequels in horror are very hard to do.
I disagree with that statement, because I think series like Halloween and even Freddy Krueger, to an extent, have made excellent sequels. And more recently, you got movies like Saw, which people seem to love the sequels more and more every single time one of them comes out. Mm-hmm. For Jaws, though, not the case. Maybe they just haven't perfected that chemistry down yet. They didn't know how to make a good horror sequel. All of them were terrible. And when you start putting someone like Dennis Quaid into your movies, you know you're not taking them as seriously anymore.
Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, okay. Jaws 3D especially is the one I'd like. I always remember this one specific scene in Jaws 3D where the shark swims into a piece of glass. It's a completely still shark, no movement on it whatsoever, no no fins shaking around. Just 100% like plastic toy shark swims into what's supposed to be a window, and you see it move, and it like just stops in midair for a second, doesn't move at all, and then like half a second later, it cracks. The glass cracks, and that's the effect they went for. It's like, that was awful. Like, I could have done a better effect than that. And yeah, granted, it was 1983, but ugh. And even back then, anytime you try to do something in 3D, it just comes off hokey, and it ruins the whole movie if you try to watch it in a normal experience. And of course, you can't watch it in 3D either, because 3D technology back then with the blue and red glasses, you think the new ones hurt your eyes? Try watching a whole movie with those frickin' things on.
Tony, what was your opinions on the sequels that followed?
Oh, they were so bad. Oh, God, there's no redeeming quality about them whatsoever. I mean, you've got the idea that other sharks are the same size as this one monstrosity that nobody's ever fucking seen before, and that they have a grudge against the family. Like, these sharks all talked to each other and went, yo, get the fucking Brodies. They killed Bruce, man. And, God, they're just... the acting's even worse. The writing for everything's worse. And killing this shark, they tried to give him gimmicks and stuff, and that came off worse. The movie, this first movie here, has a pretty effective way of killing the shark. I mean, you set up the idea of the compressed air, he shoots it, it blows up. Okay, that's something that's, while it's not, going to happen on a daily basis, it's relatively reasonable. Other ones are bringing in fucking electrical impulses and crap, and it's like, I forget which one it was. I think it was number 4. I specifically remember seeing as a kid where they were doing that electrical impulse thing, and they just keep flashing like a light bulb at the shark, and it's just like, that hurts, no, whatever. And I'm like,
oh, the shark has epilepsy. Oh.
Right. As a kid, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? How is this hurting a shark? Like, if you could just turn a light switch back and forth and it kills these animals, why the fuck are they still alive? They are terrible. There's no redeeming quality whatsoever about these sequels, and it's a shame that they exist, because if it would have just been the one Jaws movie, maybe there wouldn't be as many jokes that you can make about it, but goddamn, Jaws 2, the only good thing about that is the tagline, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. That is amazing. Everything else from all 3 of those other movies, just get rid of it.
One thing I'd like to touch upon before we go into our final thoughts on the movie Jaws is its legacy. Like we said, this is Spielberg's debut, big heavy hitter film, and it was made. It's one of those things that's often referred to when talking about movie history, as well as it was added to the Congressional Library in 2001. Going around, we've seen influence from Jaws to many other movies in the future. Tony, I'll start with you. What huge legacy impacts have you noticed through other film between when Jaws first debuted and today?
I think not only is there some kind of a legacy when it comes to just filming tactics and people trying to replicate that and stuff, but I think that one important thing to throw out there is just how people were such fans of it that it's become one of those movies that's a cult classic. There's 2 examples that come to my mind of people that reference things just because they love Jaws, and that's there's a line in the movie, "That's some bad hat, Harry," which Bryan Singer named his production company, Bad Hat Harry. That's entirely from Jaws. The movie Mallrats from Kevin Smith, the follow-up to Clerks, the 2 main characters are Brody and Quint, the 2 characters from Jaws. People have named characters Bruce when they are referring to Jaws, because that's the name of the shark. People try to make references to the music, because the music is one of the key things throughout this movie. That's something I should have mentioned earlier with the highlights of it. Anytime you hear like dun 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 dun, any kind of variant of that, people are referencing Jaws. And whether it's the means of filming a monster movie or doing suspense in general, or just, throwing out a reference like the Bad Hat Harry and the Quentin Brody things from being a fan of it, Jaws is a movie that really is on that list of those 100 or so movies that you just have to see at some point in your life, because you might not love it, you might not think it's the most entertaining movie in the world or whatever, but guaranteed you're going to take something out of it, and you'll be able to have so many more conversations about movies from that.
Paden, what was your thoughts on the legacy of Jaws?
Well, we already talked about how excellent Steven Spielberg is, but most importantly for this, I think, is that this is where Steven Spielberg hooked up with the man that is John Williams. And as Tony said, they made that iconic theme, which you just hear everywhere. Like, you watch SpongeBob, you hear the Jaws theme. You watch Saturday Night Live, you're hearing the Jaws theme used for something. It's so iconic, with something evil creeping up at you. And these two would go on to work with each other all the way up until today for decades, and just making amazing film and sound combinations that complement each other so goddamn much. Jaws as a movie, as we said, it's not the greatest thing, but I think it's a lot like reading Shakespeare, where you got to go to the basics and you got to know where everything came from, because just like most stories are written off of something that Shakespeare wrote, most modern movies are based off of a lot of the techniques that Jaws started. So when you can go back and see where they all came from, it makes you appreciate a lot more what you see these days. And I think if someone went back and saw that, they could really, really appreciate a lot more of these modern action/horror movies that we have, like the modern War of the Worlds or something like that, to see how far things have changed.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're winding up on our 30 minutes here for Jaws. We'll go around between you guys, and we'll just get your final rating between 1 and 10 on the movie. 1, it was terrible, throw it away. 10, rush out and go see the re-release that's happening now in the local theater. And we'll start with you, Mr. Paden. What was your final thoughts and scale 1 to 10?
Oh, well, as far as just like an opinion of a movie overall, I would put it at like a 7.5. Around that 3/4 mark. But I am going to put the asterisk next to it, saying that still you have to go see it. I'm not going to give it the 10, but it's still a movie that everyone needs to see. And if you have the opportunity to go see it in theaters, there's not a lot of great movies coming out this summer. There's a lot of energies that are being held over until the next. So why not spend one of your movie weekends going to see Jaws?
And Tony, same question. 1 to 10 and your final thoughts.
I pretty much have to echo the same thing. I don't know if I would recommend it to somebody as a 10 just on its own merits, and just go, oh, you got to watch this movie because it's, you'll love it, you'll watch it over and over and over again. I'd probably go around like a 6, 7 or so, and I have to do the same asterisk. It's a 10 when it comes to you have to see it, though, because if you're going to be somebody who converses about movies, you have to see Jaws. It's just like you have to see Citizen Kane, you have to see The Godfather, you have to see any of these iconic movies. Jaws is one of those. You have to see it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our conversation on Jaws. What we're going to do next is roll into our next film here on the For Real Movie Club. For those of you that are listening live, remember you could dial in at 760-512-7247, discuss the movies with us. And for those of you that are listening on the archive sessions, because you didn't listen to us today, which was June 22nd, click over to the next video and hear us talk about One Crazy Summer.